Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I'm going to try to get through this. I have been sick all day. It has been awful. Um, so I just feel terrible. And so I thought, well, I'll make me a video and see if I can get my mind off of it. And if I can't, I'll just end the video and do it another time, right? So, welcome, and I'm glad to have you here. Hey, Jackie Hughes, how are you doing? Okay, so the way I think I want to start this video is Jackie Hughes, can you do me a favor? I am gonna let's see, hidden. What is the name of that channel? Hidden True Crime, right? A podcast. Hidden, a true crime podcast. They renamed it. I like the name they're using now much better. And this has Dr. John, who is a forensic psychologist, and is it Ashley? Okay, so let me get their link, and I want to post it. Hidden, a true crime podcast. Okay, so yeah, here it is right here. Okay, so they have okay. They have they have been doing research. She is a trained journalist. She works and makes her living as a journalist. He is a forensic psychologist, I believe. I'm right about that. And so they now they're married, and there's the link, Jackie, if you'll just kind of keep, or Kathy, if you just keep kind of listing it, um so people can find it if they haven't watched it before. Okay, so I've been watching Hidden True Crime podcast for several different reasons, but one is they're probably, realistically, of all the channels on YouTube, they've probably done more in terms of background and history on the individual players related to the Lori Vallow, Charles Daybell cases, where you had the death of Tammy Daybell, a wife, you had the death of Charles Vallow, a husband, and then you had JJ and Tylee, who were two children, Lori Vallow's children, um, that also lost their lives. And I believe, it's my opinion only. My opinion is that Ryan, Joseph Ryan, that he was probably the first casualty. I believe that. Um, but nevertheless, they have a really rich understanding of the situation as it unfolded and the facts of the case and whatnot. She was doing a lot of research on this early on before he began to join the podcast. And of course, now with him on the podcast, you've got that evaluative background and forensic basis. So they have a lot of amazing and really great content in preparation for this trial. And my understanding is that she is actually going to be in Boise for the trial. So I had intended to watch it with Nate Eaton, At the end of each day, they will upload the audio, and we'll be able to listen to. It'll only be audio, won't be video, but we'll be at least be able to listen to what happened that day in court. We'll be able to look at that every night. Apparently, she is going to be there, which I was thrilled to hear that, because we'll probably get some live tweeting, which will help if you have Nate Eaton and she and a couple of others doing live tweeting while it's actually going on. It can kind of make you at least feel like you're there, right? Hey, Sleepy Fish, welcome. Hi, Chris Ann. Hi, Cindy Sue, welcome. Yeah, I had a rough day. I'm not feeling well at all, but anyway, yeah, for those of you so I have rheumatoid arthritis, and so sometimes the medicines are very difficult, and I'm in a battle right now with that. So anyway, so if we can just kind of put their link up every so often in the chat, because they're actually a really great resource, the amount of information that they have. I watched a great interview this morning, and just about filled up a little single topic, spiral notebook. And this was with Chad Daybell's sister-in-law. So I'm working on a video just with the information from her only. Really, anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked. So there's this conversation that they were that Dr. John and his wife are having this conversation. And one of the comments that gets left, I believe it was left by a lady named Karen Michelle. And one of the things she said, so, at this point, like, is trauma, where do we draw the line so that trauma cannot be just an excuse for bad behavior? And in many ways, you kind of get that feeling when you listen to mitigation specialists and you listen to attorneys trying to explain away behavior of criminal activity. And so I thought, that is actually a really great, it's a really great topic to discuss as a parallel to this question about, were these people involved in a cult? I don't mean the Mormon LDS church, but I don't know what we could call it. The cult of the Chadster, the king and queen of the damned. I don't know what you would call it, but I think definitely from my calculus, it looks like it was sort of an offshoot of the preparing a people, which technically, if you really get into that information, they're really kind of a prepper group. And you've got to remember that everything that was happening during this period of time, every single bit of it was revolving around this idea of the end of times, right? It was the end of times. And that was the driving force for everything. The preparing of people is a group of people. It was a church sanctioned get-togethers on how to survive. How do you cook food, when you don't have electricity or gas, heating. And they were spending a great deal of money on prepper food, and they all, chipped in and bought these giant tents that everybody's going to live in little communities together. And I guess Chad got some sort of vision that said that Rexburg would be one of those areas. I had always thought that it was like in Colorado, Utah, sometimes Oklahoma, but for the Chadsters cult, he was really dead set on it being Rexburg. He really had that in his head. It is a bit disturbing for me when I think about Melanie Gibb and David, his name escapes me, David, it'll come to me in a minute. He's a general contractor, and Chad Daybell wanted him to look at this piece of land. I'm going to assume it was to build perhaps living quarters for the 144,000 or the Church of the Firstborn? Was it to make a community center? Was it to build a new church that would be used after the end of times, catastrophic event occurred? I mean, what? But I think you can't ignore the common thread, the storyline that holds all these people together and makes them look like, yeah, they're all living this parallel belief system, including Jason Mao. He's at the heart of preparing a people. He's teaching people, warrior up or something like that. And how do you survive? How do you protect your people and your place come end times? You've got Zulema Pastenis, who's sitting over there. What's her role in all this? If Lori is going to be the priestess, the queen of the 144,000, and Chad is going to be the prophet, he'll be the king of the 144,000, then what role does Zulema play? Alex was the guardian angel, or no, the avenging angel. So what role was it for Zulema? And sadly, or almost comically, if you're fairly rational, it's comical that she actually believed that her job was to conjure up the earthquakes. Literally. It's easy to focus on Lori and Chad as this, and I guess Alex. It's easy to focus on them as the heart of the nightmare that Tammy and Charles and JJ and Tylee experienced. That is easy. But I don't know how you can, if you learn the background information, I don't know how you can ignore the behaviors, the organized activities that this group was doing together, like their meetings that they were having where they were casting blessings and they were killing zombies. You remember that? Zulema Pastenis was included in that. And if you're a rational, logical person, you look at that and you think that is so unusual. I can't imagine me being in a situation that I would go to a meeting where I would take part in a ritual that is designed to create a killer earthquake so that all of California goes into the ocean and Brigham Young Church falls to the ground. And I cannot imagine doing this in a way that is parallel to saying, oh gosh, look at the time. It's already 8 o'clock. I better get home. I've got some earthquakes to conjure up. Oh yeah, and I better get the chicken and dumplings on the stove cooking. And that is kind of what it looked like when once the information began to come out, and people were reading text messages, and you began to realize that the people that were in this group, the people that were in the inner circle of Lori and Charles, Chad, they did accept all of this as reality. And that is very hard to understand. Now, there does seem to be this ongoing debate. There does seem to be this ongoing debate about who is the ringleader here. Who was the cart and who was the horse? Is Chad the horse that's driving this nightmare? Or was it Lori Vallow? She is the horse and Chad is the cart. I think it depends on what your perspective is. I think Lori's family believes that Chad, he was a bad influence on Lori. That when she encountered him, when she met him, her life took a dramatic turn for the worse. And if you talk with Chad's children, to some extent his mom, they will say that Lori is driving this thing, that Lori was the bad influence, that Lori caused everything to go off the rails. The Daybell children even have come out and said that Alex and Lori, they framed Chad. They framed him. It's hard to understand, right? It's hard. It's very difficult to understand how these adult children look at their father, and the two kids are buried right there in their backyard, and somehow they believe that their dad was this little victim. It's very hard to understand. But to be fair, would you believe it if your dad had gotten involved in this mess? So, we have to be a little. Now, rumor has it that some of Chad's children, well, they can be a bit offensive. It does seem like one or two of them have grown up with this influence of magical thinking, and my dad is a prophet, and he's special and has special gifts. And they have bought into that. And so they do look at their dad as being, an elder in the church with special powers, and they act the part. And there's a few of the kids that don't act that way, that they're just living a normal life. They've got jobs that they're trying to do, and they're polite to people, they're kind, and they're just trying to live a life that's been made very difficult by, the decisions that Chad Daybell has made. So this question of, is childhood trauma an excuse for bad behavior? We know that Lori Vallow was married how many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, right? We know now that Zulema Pastenis also has been married 6 times. Alex Cox was the 6th husband, and so you see these patterns of behavior. Y'all look at Melanie. While she hasn't had many marriages like Lori and Zulema, she had a long marriage with children, and for all intent purposes, the people that knew her said that they were shocked to find out that they were getting divorced, because it seemed like they were such a happy family. And then the story, Melanie tells a story about what a miserable marriage it's been, and she's so grateful to get out. Well, why didn't she leave? Why did she have to wait to have David before she left her husband? If he was such an awful person, why didn't she just get divorced? Why did she have to have another man in the wings waiting for her? Again, it was very quick. You get married, and then they separate and divorce and turn right around, and boom, they get married. Melanie Pulowski, Melanie Boudreau, same exact thing. Seemed to have a really good marriage. The Brandon, the husband, was shocked when she filed for divorce and when she went off and left her kids. And she turns around and she marries this man just within days. And everybody's freaked out. His ex-wife, the mother of Ian Pulowski's children, was just terrified when she realized what her ex-husband was involved in, because she was worried about the safety of her children. So this group, not only did they seem to be connected to one another in a highly emotional manner, something quite dramatically outside of the norm when you're talking about middle-aged people. When we become middle to middle-aged adults, we're very close to our family members. We might have 1 or 2 longtime friends that they're like family to us. but we don't typically go out and start making friends, at the Sunday school class, and then all of those people become family. And the lady who does your hair, now suddenly she's family. That's a phenomenon that you're more likely to see like in young adulthood, late high school, college, perhaps. But by the time you start having children, you've been married a decade or so, it's not really, you don't get that close. And yet this group did, in a highly unusual way. In some ways, they seem to be mimicking these very deep and passionate friendships, because when you really question them, it was shocking that they really only knew one another in a very shallow and passing way. And yet they seem so dedicated and devoted to one another. It's very interesting. So in a podcast that Zulema Pastenis was on, y'all have heard me many times talk about she sells hugs, that she's a hug therapist. And, it's like $100 for an hour of hugging, I suppose. Well, in one of these podcasts that she's being interviewed, she talks about being terrified, 6, 8 years old. She's afraid to go to the doctor. And the reason is because she was living in a home where there was a great deal of turmoil. It was very loud from all the arguing and yelling and fighting that was going on. And the stepfather was abusive in every way imaginable. Correct? Physically abusive, emotionally abusive. The other one that if I say it, then I get demonetized instantly. And so this was happening to her, and she feared that if she went to a doctor, the doctor would know, in her exact words, that I was dirty, or the doctor would think that she was dirty, or that she would find out that she was pregnant. And this is a 6, 7, 8-year-old child. So, you get the feeling from this, as she's describing it, that she is really traumatized, that she grew up in a way that really had some profound effects on her developmentally. And obviously that type of early living circumstances during formative years would have an effect on her ability for forming relationships and love interest. So she's telling this story and she's talking about it, and she falls into this job where she's, hugging people. It's a commodity that she can make a good living with. $100 an hour to hug people. And she has, she has clients. She talks at length about tapping into the source energy. And I guess I could say that God is considered source energy. But it's a little bothersome, when you hear it, it bothers you because you feel like, gosh, you're selling $100 an hour to hug people. You're turning hugs and support into a commodity to be bought and sold. So even though you're reflecting that need for acceptance and physical comfort and love, you've made it very shallow and objectified an act of mutual affection, with all things that would be common with abuse. 1 minute, I need a drink. So between this job that she builds for herself, where she's basically providing comfort to people and teaching them how to tap into the energy of religion and God to find comfort and peace, the multiple marriages across her lifespan, it's easy to see that there is, or not as easy to see, but it's possible that one of the reasons that she kind of fell into this job of comfort in leading people to organized religion, it's possible that this is the result of some attachment disruptions, right? These family systems failures that make it difficult for people to form solid attachments and develop depth in their love relationships, that ability can really be undermined by early abuse. For one thing, people grow up with a worldview that the world is not a trustworthy place, that the world is not a safe place. And so you need to really kind of keep everything locked down and hidden inside. You don't want a bunch of emotions bubbling to the surface and causing you to act out in a way that you're not going to be able to control. And so, for her, religion has been something that has created stability. It's given her a framework for how to maneuver the difficulties in life. So I think the point of me kind of going at length into this is the possibility that I think it would be interesting to consider that these early life disruptions, growing up in abusive homes and such, that these were the magnet that drew this group together. That the focus on religion in order to manage this dramatic turmoil that they had grown up in, that this may be what initially gave Chad Daybell, and I guess to some extent Lori, gave them their power to bring this group together, and then to keep them close until it gelled into its, one mind think tank. And then they began to control one another. Now, one thing that I struggle with in this is, Jason Mao is charismatic. There are people in the world that are very charming. They exude power and confidence, and that is very attractive to other people. Gives you a sense of safety. You might find it, physically attractive, things like that. But people that are confident and strong, have a good command of the, language, they inspire confidence in others, and you can talk people into following you, like Jim Jones, for example. Travis Alexander was highly charismatic, so much so that he rose through the ranks of his company very quickly and was put into a leadership position where he was actually working as kind of a motivational speaker, to get all the other employees to sell as much of their product as possible. But Chad Daybell is not one of those. Can we be honest? If you believe Chad Daybell is charismatic, put a 1. If you think that the donut you ate last week for breakfast was more charismatic than Chad Daybell, put a 2. Just curious. I'm going to go with the donut in terms of its ability to inspire people as compared to Chad's ability to inspire people. Jerry says, oh, definitely it was the donut. The donut wins. Okay, Vicky says donut. Yep. Okay. So Chad doesn't have that charisma. He certainly does not have the energy. And like his sister-in-law said, he's sort of a goober head. And, Lori got a hold of him, and he slimmed down. He lost a ton of weight. He grew his hair out, and I guess she was, shaping it for him and styling it. She is by training, she's a hairstylist. So, I think it was a little sad to see him in Hawaii with this haircut that we see among like the junior high boys and high school boys. But it gives you some good insight into Lori Vallow's worldview, in that she doesn't believe she's old. And I think that for Lori specifically, this is an integral part of my conceptualization of what happened here. Dr. John believes his point of view. I think he's pretty convinced that Chad Daybell is the driver of this buggy. He's the manipulative one. He's the one that conceived of all of this and pretty much manipulated Lori into going along with all the nonsense. Okay, and he's far more eloquent in describing it. Go over to their channel and listen to their live, because it's definitely worth it. But I'm just saying that's their point of view, and I grapple with that. I go back and forth. Admittedly, I go back and forth. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Rob Wood, the prosecutor, that he hates Chad Daybell. He believes that Chad Daybell 100% is responsible for what happened to the two children and Tammy and Charles. That's the prosecutor's point of view. But I have a hard time seeing Lori as a victim. Now, if you believe that Chad Daybell was the one that conceived of all of this and made it happen, put a 1. Or if you're kind of like me, that you just cannot shake the manipulativeness of Lori Vallow, put a 2. I'm just a little curious. I think Lori is more involved in this than a lot of people want to admit. You think that Lori is bossy, and you think it's both. I'm definitely with you. I definitely think this is what we call interaction effects. It's highly possible that if the two had never gotten together, nobody would have died. That if the two had never gotten together, everybody would be living and alive, regardless of whether they had been, divorced or not. But the wrong kind of crazy hooked up with the right kind of crazy, and they ended up with a train wreck. That's the way I look at it. It was an interactive effect that his particular personality problems and delusional thought, combined with her, what I believe are narcissistic needs, and some borderline. And I think that when you put those two, the energies from those two together, I think you've got a story that's going to come up on the 6 o'clock news. She was a fish who finally found her pond. That is a very good way of putting it. Yes. Thing 1 says 1 and 2. Lori did nothing without Chad telling her. This is the way. Wait a minute. Lori did nothing without Chad telling her. This is the way, the light, the truth. So you think what you're saying, Boo, is you think that, are you saying that you believe that Chad manipulated or controlled Lori or manipulated Lori by making her believe that all of this was ordained by God, that there was mystical magic involved in these things? Is that what you're saying? Thank you, Thing 1, for putting the link up. I was waiting to see if Boo was going to explain further. Let me go on. Okay. So with childhood, let's see, I think the way, light, and the truth directive came from higher than Chad. Yeah, I definitely, Martian Planet, I'm with you. I don't think that Chad and Lori were the top of this food chain. I think there were other people that were above them, but they're protected. Yeah, I believe that. So the early childhood trauma that Dilemma Pastenis talked about, and we also get hints of it, same type of dynamics from Alec Cox's girlfriend, some of the descriptions and stories about Lori's childhood growing up, the things that her sisters endured, things like that. And for sure, with Lori and Zulema, both of these women, they did have a lot of trauma in childhood, and they had multiple marriages that were, quite chaotic. And they both seem to have been drawn to religion or God in their own way. For Lori, it was through the church, and for Zulema, it was more of this idea of source energy, just the healing of good power, good energy in the universe, and her tapping into that. These are the things I think that pulled this group together. I think that Melanie, I have heard people suggest that maybe Melanie Pulowski is Lori's daughter, that there are some court documents. Lori, as a young woman, went to live with another family, and during that time she was pregnant, and they claimed in the court documents, they claimed that she had a miscarriage, but the times match up to Melanie Pulowski's age. They're also very committed to one another, and so there are some people that have, they're convinced that Melanie is Lori's daughter, but we don't know. That's just complete speculation based on a little bit in some court documents. I don't have an opinion about it either way myself personally. That's more interesting that there's possibly others above them that are protected. I've never thought beyond Chad. Yeah, I kind of think there probably is. Lori never acted in this manner before Chad. But are you sure about that? And that's kind of one of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight. I think we do see Lori. We do see Lori seeking out narcissistic supply. She wants to be on stage. She wants people to know who she is. She wants people to hold her up and, now, was she violent against other people? No, it doesn't seem like it. In fact, if you look back at their history, seems like that she and her sister, there was a lot of music. They did a lot of singing and making dances together. And, it doesn't seem like it was violent or bad. But if you remember Alex Cox's old girlfriend and best friend in Arizona, she said that they had a very unusual relationship, that they often mimicked sexual acts. They often told very off-color jokes or acted out these unusual things that really, they might not have been uncomfortable if it had been between a husband and a wife, but because it's a brother and a sister, it would make her feel very, very uncomfortable. And it just seemed like to her that Alex and Lori, that the boundaries, they were having some trouble setting some boundaries. And that might explain why Alex seemed so devoted to Lori. Melanie Gibbs said that Alex believed, that he voiced, that it was his job to protect his sister, and that in many ways she took on the role as an avenging angel, and she was sort of there to do Lori's dirty work, if you will. So again, the thing that draws this group together, this so-called potential cult, the thing that draws them all together is this, the need for power growing out of trauma, but then using religion as a source or as an organizing structure for them to declare their power, right? All Chad Daybell had to do was write a crappy little book and then market it to the Preparing a People group, and he was accepted as a prophet. there's some reasons to believe that his story about, the I don't know, torn veil, um, that it was all too that it was contrived. It's too simplistic, and it was a quest for power. It was a power grab when he did it. That he had been exposed to Julie Rowe and had seen that her books were making money, and other people that said they had visions and such were making money. And so it was like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Now, it is disturbing. I will say this: it is disturbing that supposedly Chad is having these conversations with Julie long before Lori came along, that his wife Tammy is going to die, and that Julie is saying, "Yeah, I see it. You're right. She is going to die. I can see it." And they're having these conversations about the date and time and how it's going to happen. And this was before Lori ever entered the picture. I think Chad, that it was his game, to say, "Oh, we were married back in another life." I think that was how he picked up women. And if they thought that he could legitimately see behind the veil, if these people were really people that bought into this whole magical universe brought to you by God, then to have Chad Daybell, the prophet and the visionary, to have him say, "Oh gosh, Jules, we were married in another lifetime, and you've always been a goddess. You were a priestess, and if you're the kind of woman that you believe all of this, it might be really powerful. It might be powerful enough to make you consider leaving your husband and children." So, did they make good money? Well, they made some money. I don't think they made actually good, well, probably not what you and I would call good money. But I think they made a little bit of money. He didn't really have any other job. For a while, he worked as a sexton. He was, he was digging grave sites and such. But I think, his wife set up the publishing company, and for a long time, she's the one that ran it. And he wrote these terrible books or signed on other authors. Their books are a little bit better. But his are awful. They read like a fourth grade kid who, "Oh, this looks like a good place for a chapter." There's really not much organization. It's very difficult to read his books. They're just very boring and kind of self-serving. It's hard. And yes, people fell for what he was, the stuff he was serving up. But again, there's a common element, or appears to be, and that is people that seem to have experienced early trauma, and there is an attraction toward using religion, using a church as a structure, as an organizing theory, or the inherent routines that are associated with organized religion. That seemed to be the tie that binds. That seemed to be the thing that they were all attracted to and gravitated toward, and what held them together and made them look up to Chad. I look at Chad and I see a man who is very socially clumsy, maybe a little bit anxious, may have some social anxiety or whatever. I think he feels like he's the black sheep of the family. I think he's probably jealous of his more successful brothers. And I think he saw this publishing company and his ability to write books. I think he saw that as one way to get the narcissistic need that he supplied, that he was so hungry for. He even tried this he even tried this rationalizing where he said that he didn't want a career like as an attorney or anything, that he didn't want one of these types of careers because he's a man of God, and so he can't make a lot of money because he's got to, stay pious and stay poor, and that's what, causes him to have a authentic relationship with God. But make no mistake about it. That's just a uh, psychological tool that people use to manage disappointment and um, core trauma, things like that. There's a lot of different ways to deal with some of that hurt and trauma, but I definitely think for him he was rationalizing, and then his, he goes directly against this whole thing. I'm a man of God, and I want to be poor because that makes me a better prophet, I guess. But then he immediately turns around, apparently, according to Hidden a True Crime podcast. They said that somebody that she talked to said that Chad Daybell was telling him about his new wife, Lori, and that she was very beautiful and she was loaded, meaning tons of money, right? Well, she didn't end up getting that ton of money. She wasn't loaded, but he apparently thought that he was getting a loaded babe. So there was, that little bit of trouble in paradise. But I've already shown the video of them in Hawaii when I was making the case that Lori is not insane in terms of the definition of the law of the state. She's not insane. She may have a personality disorder. Maybe has some mood troubles and things like that, but she doesn't believe she's a dragonfly. She doesn't think that she's a broken tile in the middle of the White House. She knows very well who she is. She demonstrates logical linear thought. She showed very good fluid reasoning as she's being followed by the news cameras and Nate Eaton, and they're all asking questions. She grabs a hold of his hand. He's not protecting her. Chad is not showing that he's in control. He's not the one figuring out what to do. She is. That's another reason that I have a very hard time buying into this idea that Chad drove this ship. I don't believe it was him. I think he became a tool. I think he was an instrument that Lori was able to make use of. And I think he came along at just the right time in her life, correct? Let me get to my paragraph. Sorry. He came along at just the right time in her life. And the reason that I say that is this. Lori has begun living with Charles in Arizona. Lori has begun to live in misery. She's miserable. If you follow a guy named Alfred Adler, he made this in a nutshell. I don't want to get bogged down in this, but the simplest way to understand it is that, there is the daily you, the actual person you are as you go about your day today. And then inside of you, there is the idealized form of you, like you at your finest, at your very best, living the life with the dreams and the goals that you value. And the closer those two are together, the healthier you are. So if your idealized, realized self, the things that matter to you, is very close to what your day-to-day life is, that you know what your goals are, that you're taking active steps to attain those goals. The closer those two ideas are, the healthier you are. And the further apart those two ideas are, then of course, the further apart you are. And I think for Lori, her idealized self, well, that was, Mrs. Texas. That's the idealized Lori. Or the young lady that made songs and dances with her sister Summer, and they sang and they danced in the parents' living room. That's the idealized. That's the performer. That's the beautiful woman that everyone stops and looks at. That is her worth, right? And so all of that is going incredibly well. She's an incredibly beautiful woman when she has Colby. She's married to LaGoya. Then she goes on, gets divorced, goes on and marries another very handsome man who was making a lot of money, and that was Joe Ryan. Has Ty Lee. She's still very beautiful, very beautiful. And little by little, then she finally ends up with a man who is making bank. Charles Vallow was making a lot of money. He was a businessman. He was well loved. He had a great personality. He was a strong man. I'm talking about in temperament and spirit. He stopped drinking for her. He converted to LDS for her. He was a well organized and strong person, and he was devoted to his family. His identity included his role as family man. So she seemed to have that, which is what she'd always been wanting, right? She wanted the prettiest house and the prettiest clothes and the prettiest cars, and she wanted all those things. She finally was in a position of having that, and she had a husband that treated her very well, that put her up on a pedestal per Melanie Gibb. Melanie Gibb talks about and says, it was very uncomfortable because Charles Vallow tried so hard to make her happy, but Lori just didn't seem to ever be happy. She just always seemed to reject whatever nice, kind thing that Charles was trying to do. And she seemed to be driven by something that Melanie Gibb did not understand. Those were her exact words. Well, I believe that what it was her hormone levels. I think that she was either premenopausal or going through the beginnings of menopause. I think she was losing estrogen. I think the wrinkles were appearing. I think her beauty was fading. I think all of that was all coming together at the same time as she met Melanie Gibb. Everybody wants to say, "Oh, well, she met Chad Daybell, and once she met him, it all went to hell in a handbasket." But isn't it true that she actually met Melanie Gibb first? If you think that is accurate, put a 1. If you think I'm wrong about that, put a 2. I agree, Pussycat. She wants to be 21. She wants to be a young starlet. She wants to be the little hottie that all the men, swoon over because she's beautiful. And she was quite beautiful. Let's deal with facts. By most standards, people would say, yes, she was a beautiful woman. Yeah, so she actually met Melanie Gibb first before she met. Melanie Gibb knew Chad Daybell before Lori Vallow did. She knew Jason Mao before Lori did. What about a great personality is just not skin deep? Well, I suppose if she's happy, right? I mean, if she's happy, then she's probably got a good personality. If she's happy, she's laughing. She's an extrovert, no doubt. She's an extrovert. Look at me. She's definitely an extrovert. So if she's happy, if she's getting the love and the attention, the adoration that she craves, then she probably was happy. There's your charisma. So, I don't know. Was she sleep? I don't know. I don't think she was sleeping with Melanie. No. I don't think that. I think they're two women motivated by the same thing, and that's power and attention. And I think if you're if you're in the upper echelons of the church, aka cult, not LDS cult, but this whole offshoot that they were, what I think is, well, they were talking about things that really sounded like the Church of the Firstborn. I know the LDS people don't like that, but that's what it sounded like. So I think Chad was trying, there was a group in place that were trying to make their own religious vehicle that would be used, I think, to get donations and money and power and influence. I really believe that. The LDS church had sort of frowned on all this talk of magic underwear and all that. That the church, those are intelligent people. They know it sounds silly. It's not 1800s anymore. They tried to control some of the information coming out about Joseph Smith, and of course they had some trouble with the Mormon murders and the white salamander problem. And the modern church is, they're trying to do the right thing, to be mainstream and acceptable. And when you've got, frankly, you've got people like Chad Daybell running around talking about portals and his veil being ripped open because he jumped in the water off a cliff. I don't know. I think he did damage to his testicles rather than it being a special veil that he now can see in the afterlife. It's just silly. That is, and again, if you're a rational, logical person, you can recognize the silliness of it, the foolishness of it. But if you are the kind of person that you really feel like you are lacking something in your life, you are seeking out purpose and meaning because of the trauma that you experienced in childhood, you run across a guy like him who has these fantastical tales and doesn't seem to have any ethics to control himself in his, we can call them lies or we can call them imagination, his fictional writings. But if you're the kind of person that these things are important to you, that these stories, you believe that they have merit, then you might look at Chad Daybell as a prophet, as a Jesus figure, or Noah or Moses. And if you did that, you might really be attracted to him. But I just see a guy who's just a little derpy derp, right? Kind of derpy. And, he's just, it's kind of sad. He's socially uncomfortable, and he wrote these fantastic tales. And it was his misfortune, I think, that so many people believed what he wrote. It was misfortune that he ran across Julie Rowe. I think she's definitely capitalizing on her mess. Definitely. That one is crazy like a fox, in my opinion. But for Lori, I think it was different dynamics. I think she was of an age where the adjustment to, well, I'm not the cutest little chicken, in the hen house anymore. I'm getting a bit older. My beauty's fading. My skin's a little dull. My skin and hair is a little bit dull. I don't get men turning heads to look at me anymore like they used to. It's a little weird for an older woman to be flirting around with 20-year-olds. It makes people uncomfortable. And so I think she's beginning to notice that, hey, what am I going to do? Remember what I said about Adler and the idealized self being too far removed from the realized person. Then she says, well, what am I going to do? Who will I be if I'm not the beauty queen? Who will I be if it's no longer my job to smile and to give men the warm fuzzies and to make people feel welcomed and good because I'm showering sunshine on them? And this is not unusual. She's not the only person in the world that ever experienced this. This is common for beautiful women to go through. If they haven't taken the time to cultivate careers and education and value themselves for more than their physical appearance, then, when age starts setting in, it can be a pretty rough time for them. Thankfully, in 2023, I think a great majority of mothers have taught their daughters, you are much more than your beauty, and you need to cultivate your mind and your skills and be proud of who you are. Doesn't matter what you look like, it's your substance that matters. But nevertheless, you've got waning hormone levels that make you feel a little less extroverted, maybe more depressed, maybe putting on weight. You don't understand why you're gaining weight. Beauty's fading a little bit. You've got also this problem of JJ, that JJ is on the spectrum. He is your responsibility, and you've been a great mother to him when he's a little boy. But as they begin to age, they need you less. Neurotypical children tend to need you more. Neurotypical children continue to want hugs. When a boyfriend breaks up with you, they call you at 3:00 in the morning crying, "Mom, guess what happened?" Those things happen. And while you're the one that's supposed to be there for your child and offer guidance or just support as they adjust to a new normal, there is something that is very rewarding, that helps promote the attachment in adulthood, when that child is the one that reaches out to you. That when that phone rings at 3:00 in the morning, that your child wants to talk to you because they're sad or because they miss you. Or your child is calling you and saying, "Please come visit me. I miss you." That is something that is really, really self-actualizing. It's a good thing to have that realization that, oh, I've got a great relationship with my adult children. Lori wasn't going to she would have that with Tylee and with Colby, but she wouldn't have that with JJ. And it was very hard because he was still young enough that he really needed her time and her attention, her energy to help him with his stage in life. But she's not getting that reward contingency of, I help my child who's having a difficult time, and in return, I get a little bit of feedback that makes me feel like, yes, this is worthwhile, and I'm feeling good about things. It's a bit hard to understand, and it seems a little bit shallow, but it's a real phenomenon. And this happening at the same time that she's becoming aware that her beauty's fading, her hormone levels are going down. There are a lot of people that have said that she maintained this very close relationship with Colby. His wife had said that in some ways, Colby was really the only one that she was close with, that she was maintaining a relationship with. But they also said that in some ways she acted like Colby was more like a boyfriend, that her body language and conversation with Colby was much more suggestive of a dating type or a crush, not in a sick weirdo way. Don't get me wrong, but there again, he would have been a fine source of narcissistic supply as mother to Colby, because he's very handsome and very masculine and very attractive to people, right? So she would have gotten reinforcement from that role as mother to Colby, but a little bit less so as mother to JJ. So all of this is additive. It's all of these stressors that are piling on together all at the same time. And I think that set her up. I think she was in search of joy. I think she was in search of just anything that would make her feel better. A little dose of happiness, right? Just a little bit. And when she met Melanie Gibb, and Melanie Gibb is talking about some of these religious experiences, and Lori feels excited because this is something she knows. This is the way her family was growing up, and so she introduces herself. They form immediately a friendship, and they take off and start going to these, preparing a people groupings. And she's beautiful again. And the guy that everybody wants to see, the guy that clamors and falls all over themselves, the prophet Chad, is now telling Lori, oh, yeah, we were once married in another life. And at that point, her narcissistic fire was flaming. It was like a flamethrower. And I think she jumped with both feet. I think she had moments where she looked at what they were doing and the things they were talking about, and she thought, is this really real? Or have I sort of allowed this delusional thought to take over? But I definitely think that Chad was manipulating her. I think calling her a goddess and telling her she's going to be queen of the 144,000, I think that was just like, feeding oats to a horse. I think that just fired up her narcissism and made Chad a god. I know it's weird that he's a derpy derp. So it's hard to picture him in his, godly robes. But I think for her, I think it was just the perfect storm. It was the right set of circumstances, all kind of coming together. And when the dependent personality met up with the narcissistic personality and a bit of borderline, I think it was a brush fire that turned into an outright flame, just burning everything down in the path. You got to remember this too. So initially, she set up to fall for Chad, who's a derpy derp. He's unlike any man that she's ever been. All of the men she's been with before have been very handsome, very masculine, kind of like that stereotypical masculine, movie star, good looking kind of guy. Money. There was a lot of cash with many of these men that she was with. Not all of them, but many of them. And Chad was none of that, was he? He didn't have any money. He certainly wasn't stereotypical masculine. He wasn't Hollywood movie star role, unless we're talking about maybe, a creepy serial killer kind of guy. I don't know. But I think her dissatisfaction in life, her fear, her unfulfilled love, her unmet narcissistic supply, all of that, I think, coalesced. And you add on top of it this religious factor that was just an illusion of power and control. And I think that she just latched onto him. She said, for me, one day I would like to have a black Shelby. That's my dream car. So I think when she saw Chad Daybell, he said, you're a goddess and we were married before. And she's like, oh my God, he is so famous. He is an author. Now, we've read the books, some of us. I wouldn't call him a famous author any more than I would call a fifth grader that won the writing contest a famous author. But I think in her eyes, her very limited and narrow world, and her even more limited and narrow options for the future, how is she going to get her needs met? She's losing the only real tool she's ever really had, which is her youth and her beauty. What will she do? So it was a perfect storm. I really believe that. And I think I think they used one another. I think it was definitely symbiotic. It was just each one using the other and driving themselves into madness, I would even I'm going to say this. Nobody else has said this. I'm going to totally say this. As their whole loin fired, horribly embarrassing text. I'm going to go out on a limb here and just take a guess here. And if y'all agree with me, put a 1. If you think I'm totally wrong, put a 2. Okay. This is going to be fun. Any self-respecting man that would use the word loin fire as he's being romantic with the lady of his choice, what are we going to get? Are we going to bet that the guy's good in bed, or is it he's a clown? So put a 1 if you believe that a man who would use the word loin fire is probably a clown in bed and things are very cool on the mattress. And if you disagree, if you think a guy that can do sexting by talking about his loin fire, you think he's a hottie, put a 2. It's even embarrassing to talk about it, isn't it? Well, look at her mother, lots of wrinkles. Sorry to say, maybe she didn't mind dying young. That is very sad, isn't it? She won't be able to cope with age. Okay, so a lot. Yeah, hey, you are too mean. How are you? Okay, so we're a balance. A balance. Come on now. A balance. So AB says that a man who uses the word loin fire, he's got it going on. I don't think so, AB. I think a man that would use the term loin fire with his woman, I think he's probably a sincere derpy derp. Absolutely. Yes, terrible. Absolutely terrible. So I don't think things were hot. This was not a grand love affair. I don't believe that at all. I think they were filling each other's needs. He had a beautiful woman that was paying him attention, and he thought she was loaded. He thought that they were going to end up with a lot of cash. And I think she's trying to get power. She's trying to access the power of her youth when beauty and vitality was there, and that instead of youth and vitality, it was really the power of position, religious control. I really believe that. Now, Pussycat is backtracking, people. Pussycat wants you guys to know that in no way do they have any idea what loin fire even means. All right. Got that cleared up, right? Okay. So, all right. So finally, I want to reiterate, and I think this is going to be really important in terms of the trial, and it's going to be very interesting to watch the prosecution and see how they manage this. They've got to prove conspiracy. And how are they going to do that without bringing in the religious aspect? Because it's the religious foundation that drew this group together. The religiosity was the magnet. That was the glue that pulled this group of misfits together, and made them act in ways that were quite unusual. I'm not talking about the death of Charles and Tammy and JJ and Tylee. That was a nightmare. I'm talking about the unusual nature of praying to kill zombies. And then you crawl in your portal and check to see how many zombies in Indiana you killed. Can we just be honest? That is not an activity that you would be comfortable with. You would look at the other people in the room and you'd go, do these people really believe what we're doing? You would recognize it was absurd, that it was ludicrous. Or how about Zulema Pastenis saying, oh, I'm going to have to leave and go home because I have to conjure up some earthquakes. If your friend told you that, if your friend says to you, sorry, AB, I'm not going to be able to watch your podcast tonight, I'm going to be conjuring earthquakes. AB, are you going to think, oh yeah, that's going to be fine. Let's turn the TV on and wait for the earthquake to hit. Or are you going to be thinking, wow, my friend's being really strange. So there was a lot of absurd and ridiculous activity that was happening with this group of people that didn't include the nightmare monster for what they did to Tylee and JJ, what Alex did to Charles, and what I believe Chad did to Tammy Daybell. I I think they were all in a semi-delusional state, and I don't think they even believed it. I think it was a power grab by a group of people that came from early childhood trauma, and their whole lives they had been seeking out circumstances where they could finally be relevant, where they could leave the identity, the image of who they are, the abused child, and kind of live out their dreams of being beautiful and successful and wealthy and powerful. And I think they thought that preparing a people, that Chad and Lori as king and queen, that this was going to do it. That, I mean, how many television preachers are obscenely wealthy and they talk big talk, but then they're having affairs behind the scenes, and I mean, one guy killed his wife. Remember? I mean, that was horrible. So don't underestimate the power of religion to be used as a tool by non-believers. Not everyone who can quote scripture is, has the love of Christ in their heart. Sometimes it's all about, what can I get out of this? And if that's the case, then the more unprincipled you are, the more powerful your scripture will be. And that's a sad, it's a sad statement to make, but it is true. So I think this is where I'm going to end this tonight. I've got a lot to say about Melanie Gibb. I'm going to wait and, talk about that later. Also, Adam and his son, Zach. They're very important, I think, in my overall conceptualization, and I'll talk about them as well. They gave us a lot of insight into Lori and her early life, and into Alex. Zach said flat out, he says, "Ooh, Alex is a strange one." Alex was always a strange one. That came from Zach, his nephew. So the family members that were not wrapped up in all this, weirdness, we can learn a lot from them regarding Lori's background and history and Chad's background and history. And, I think Lori did do some of these things early in life. I don't think that her power grab and her thirst for narcissistic supply, that was not something new that started when she met Chad Daybell. In fact, I think Melanie Gibb was very important to Lori in terms of narcissistic supply, and ultimately was the conduit that led her to the prophet. But I think she definitely had some stuff going on. She had mood problems, but there were other things in the family, that definitely are worth talking about. So, all right. Let me take a minute. Jim Baker, there you go. Perfect example, Pussycat. Absolutely. Josh Powell was preparing of the people with all of his food prepping. Yeah. Look, that brings up a really great point too, Vicki. That preparing a people had tapped into the prepper movement. And the prepper movement has a lot of veterans. It looked like it was all planned out to maximize power and influence. And again, there are people in this organization above Chad and Lori that if I had been Rob Wood, I would have looked further up the food chain. I really would have. His prepper buckets, yes. The Brady Bunch. I personally think conjuring earthquakes is stirring the pot. I believe Zulema had directives that literally spread rumors, twisting information, keeping certain people in the dark. Absolutely. All right. Hi, Elise. So welcome. How are you? Okay, everybody. So I really wanted to do more. I wanted to get into 3 personality disorders, but I think I'm going to do that because we're already over an hour. So, we'll continue this path. Again, this isn't about diagnosing anyone. You can't diagnose someone unless you do, an investigation and interview. And of course, none of that has happened. It's really a discussion of the dynamics, general theory about motivation and sociology, and kind of speculation on what were the forces that came together from all these different people that may have affected and acted upon Lori and Chad that led them to a place where they thought it was a good idea to kill Joe Ryan, or to kill Charles Vallow, or to kill Tammy Daybell, and in horrendous, unchecked horror, the murder of a young lady, Tylee and JJ. This went off the rails in a way that is very difficult to understand. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to give some possibilities that might make it easier to understand their motivations and how they allowed themselves to get backed into this particular corner. I don't believe, not for a minute, that Alex Cox acted on his own. I don't believe that for a minute. I think that Lori acted out in narcissistic rage. I think that Chad Daybell didn't want small children in the way of his love goddess fantasy and him collecting power and control. I think the children in their eyes became a burden. All right. And we're going to talk more too about the dark and light system and the 9 levels of enlightenment. I'm going to talk about that too one day. All right. I am done. What kind of gaslighting was that, Lori, saying Charles wasn't Charles anymore, but someone else? Well, it was there. She rationalized, so she objectified him, took his humanity away from him. She recognized that she should have empathy. That if you're going to kill someone, you should have empathy. You should care. She doesn't have any empathy because she only loves Lori. So she has no empathy, and she probably, recognizes that. But Charles had to be out of the way. I do think it's very interesting that Ned Schneider, the last name Schneider was the name of the woman that married her, LaGoya. So that was kind of a fun little fact that probably doesn't mean anything, but it's kind of interesting. Where did she come up with that name at? Yeah, I think it was a way to objectify JJ and Tylee or Charles to make it possible to kill them without feeling guilt or without feeling, remorse of any kind. They certainly felt no remorse. They hopped on the airplane and they went to Hawaii and they danced on the beach. She bought her wedding ring. This is how weak Chad Daybell is. Listen to this. The wedding ring was purchased by Charles Vallow's credit card, right? So Chad Daybell doesn't even buy the wedding ring for the love goddess. Why would you think that this man has the ability to plan or plot or control anything? He couldn't even get a wedding ring. When Nate Eaton and the television camera showed up in Hawaii, He just stood there like a derpy derp with drool hanging out of his mouth. What am I going to do? And Lori just grabbed it. She's like, come on. It's like, why are you standing there? You look like a bozo. Come on. She was the one looking for the escape route. She was the one figuring out what to do. This is the woman they're telling us is so insane that she had to go in the hospital multiple times. She didn't look insane. She looked like she was using good logic. She was reacting to a novel situation, problem solving effectively. He looked like he was frozen. He looked like he didn't know what to do, but he always kind of looks that way, unless he's quoting scripture, Yeah, just objectifying them, taking away their humanity, making it so, oh no, it's okay if we get rid of them. They're not even real people anyway. They're zombies. The whole thing's silly. It's very silly. All right. So I am done. I can't thank you guys enough for being here. I appreciate it. If you would not mind, would you please do a thumbs up and also leave a comment under the video? And if you would share it on your social media, I would be forever grateful. All right. Y'all have a wonderful evening, and I will be back tomorrow afternoon, and I'll go to the next page of my outline. How's that? Y'all have a good evening.